Okay, so this one says consider the absolute function f of x is equal to the absolute value of x plus 8. And it says, how can this be written as a piecewise function? Well, let's graph that. Okay, we'll start there. So I'm going to enter into my calculator. Once I turn it on, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to clear this. Now, the absolute value, is that in math? Under number? Yeah, it's the first one under number. So if you hit the math button, it pulls up this menu, and it's the first one under number. So I'm going to hit enter, and then it shows the absolute value brackets. Then I'm just going to say x plus 8, and then that's it. I'm going to hit graph. And so the plus 8 just takes the parent function of the absolute value. Let me change my window real quick. I want to get some of the symmetry in there. So I'm going to take my x min and change that to like a negative 16. And my x max, I don't know, I'll just make it like 5. All right. And then my y min does not need to be that low. We'll make it a negative 5. And we'll get something like this. Okay. So let's take a screenshot of that and label that. So this right here, whoops. This function right here is my f of x, okay? So this is the graph of f of x is equal to the absolute value of x plus 8. And what I want to do is on my graphing calculator, it looks like a linear function that's going down and then a linear function that's going up. Okay? So I think I have a theory. I think it's going to be, because there's two parts. There's the one function that goes from here to here, and the one function that goes from here to here. So if in other words, this one, I know what this is. This is just x plus 8. And then we have the negative of this. So you may not, just to remind you, like when you do the absolute value of this plus this has two parts. It can be x plus 8 for sure, or it could be negative x plus 8. All right? And then if you distribute that negative sign through the parentheses, you get negative x minus 8. And if I look carefully, this point right here is at negative 8, I believe. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I think that f of x could be written as, and I'm going to go in order, and then we'll graph it to see. I'm going to start with, I'm just going to, I like to write it in order, but the answer is actually written backwards. So not backwards, out of order. So I'm going to start with the positive first, x plus 8. Okay. Well, x plus 8 occurs from negative 8 in this direction. So on my x-axis, from negative 8 or greater, in other words, when x is greater than or equal to negative 8, that's when I use this function x plus 8. And then From here to here, I think we're going to use, and that would be x is less than -8. I think we're going to use this function right here, which is negative x minus 8. Now this stuff right here, this is just the properties of an absolute value, right? So in other words, if I say -7, that equals 7. But if I take the absolute value of +7, that also equals 7. So whatever this thing is set equal to, it's going to be the positive representation of it, and this is going to be also the negative representation of it. So that would be like, this would be the positive representation of it, which means you don't change a thing. And then the negation of it means that you take the negative of the whole thing. All right? So that has nothing to do with the graph. The only thing that I have to do to divide the piecewise function up is to figure out where we switch from one graph to the next. Okay? So again, just to kind of recap, from here to here, I think we're using -x minus 8. Here to here, we're using x plus 8. Let me move that to where you can see it a little better. So x plus 8. And now let's graph this. I think this is right, but now we're going to graph this in our graphing calculator. Now remember from yesterday, I said the way that you graph the piecewise function is you take the first part of the function and you put, I'm going to go in the order of the domain. So I'm going to go from the furthest to the left to the furthest to the right. So I'm going to put in -x minus 8. And then I'm going to define the domain from being x is, remember we hit second math to get the test, less than -8. Plus the second part, or the second function, which is just x plus 8. And then the domain, which would be x is second math greater than or equal to -8. And then just for good, so let's graph this real quick. That's kind of neat. That's if we put it all together, but just so you guys can see this, I'm gonna do something different. I don't know why I didn't think of this before. So that's how you would graph that. But what you can actually do, you can actually, let me do this. I'm gonna graph them as different colors so that you guys can see it. So there's my red. And then for my next color, I think I did light blue. And then I'm just going to graph that as well. So I'm going to say x plus 8. And then I'm going to say x second math greater than or equal to -8, close my parentheses. So now when I graph it, uh-oh, SpaghettiOs, I must have put something in wrong. Let's see. Oh, so it's the domain. Okay, so when you do it this way, it's going to graph the whole thing. So, but as you can see, it's the same graph. So I'm going to put on top of this the absolute value so you guys can see it. So we go to this menu, absolute value, x plus 8. So now it's going to graph that right on top of it. Okay? See how that worked? Same thing.